The day of my husband's funeral, it began to rain. For the next few days, it rained and rained and rained. It was called the 1,000-year flood in our town of Columbia, South Carolina. Bridges were washed away. Homes were destroyed. Lives were lost. The floodwaters began to recede and the sun started shining. And I remember sitting on the front lawn with our son thinking to myself, how wrong it all felt. How could it be such a beautiful day when everything was so broken? I couldn't sit at home anymore. I got in the car and started driving around looking for opportunities to help, and I ended up at the local food bank called Harvest Hope. I remember telling a fellow volunteer that I almost felt selfish. Helping other people helped my own heart so much. I guess it helped others as well. While I was there, the media found out, and the story spread. I had people telling me how much it meant to them seeing me volunteer just days after burying my husband. I even had a young boy tell me that he had my picture by his computer to remind him that he could be strong too. To me, this story highlights the power of connection and shows what's possible when we reach out to help one another rather than retreating within. But how do we bring about connection when our world seems to be so divided? I believe the answer lies in empathy and in finding the courage for collaboration. This is something I know firsthand. My husband, Greg, used to say that I was his greatest joy, but really, he was mine. I would touch his hand and feel electric. Loving him transformed me. It has been 3 years since I lost him, but the memory of that day is as raw and as clear as if it were yesterday. It was a beautiful Wednesday morning, and Greg, who was a police officer, had just switched back to day shift. I was getting settled into my morning routine when the messages started rolling in. Is Greg okay? I heard something happen at the mall. The dog started to bark. A knock at the door. I learned that Greg had been riding back up on a call about a suspicious person. The man ran. Greg chased. A struggle ensued. Greg was shot. He died instantly. You know, I'm thankful that out of all the feelings I felt since losing my husband, anger and hate have been among the least common, but I have to tell you, in those first few hours, I felt angry. It was 2015, and at that time, I felt like I couldn't turn on the news without seeing another tragic story of an officer-involved shooting or an officer being shot, and with those stories would come a flurry of divisive opinions on social media. It seemed that at that time, you could either be for police or against police. And if you were against police, it felt like you were against all police, including Greg. And when he was killed, that divisive narrative left me to wonder if his service and sacrifice were valued. So I began speaking out. Within the first 48 hours, I had done a number of media interviews, all talking about Greg and sharing our story. And I did it for a variety of reasons, but more than anything, I didn't want to fuel a hateful narrative. I wanted to remind people of the humanity in this loss. Too often, we forget that there are real people behind the stories we hear in the news, and I didn't want Greg's death to become a tally mark for one team over another. I also wanted to fight the negative focus on law enforcement, which is why at 3 a.m. after my husband was killed, I shared a Facebook post asking for 2 things. I asked, 1, that people share stories about Greg so that Sal, who turned 6 months old that day, could learn about the man his father was. And 2, I said that Greg was a hero, and many other cops are too. And I proposed using the hashtag #HeroesInBlue as a way to raise awareness of the positive stories that so often go untold. A few months before Greg died, I remember asking him what he thought about the tensions between police and community. And he said, Kassy, no one wants a bad cop brought to justice more than a good cop. But for every one negative story you hear in the news, there are thousands of positive stories happening every day that go unnoticed. Heroes in Blue was intended to be a way to make those positive stories a part of the conversation. Now, Heroes in Blue was nothing more than a hashtag, a gut reaction the night after my husband was killed. Prior to his death, I was working on completing my doctorate in clinical community psychology and was doing work that I loved. However, I felt called to do something about the divisiveness that impacted me so deeply. I was excited when I was invited to speak on my first panel. The topic was race relations, and I saw it as an opportunity to break down barriers. If only people could hear me, I thought, then they would understand. Things didn't go as planned. There was a couple in attendance, and they were angry with me. It seemed that I represented everything they despised. It was so bad that afterwards people rushed up to me saying, "I can't believe they treated you that way." And the panel staff even escorted me to this private hallway as if to shield me. I was distraught. What had I said to be the target of such anger? I swung back around. I wanted to speak directly to them. What I remember most from this conversation was not necessarily what they said, but what I learned. I learned what it felt like to lean into what was uncomfortable for me to hear, to listen deeply and openly. And I learned that change was less about being understood, but in seeking to understand. I walked away from that conversation not agreeing with how the couple had expressed their pain, but I felt that I better understood where they were coming from and saw that I had much to learn about people who distrust police. And I realized that my own efforts to bring people together would only go so far if I remained stuck in my own perspective. I had to understand what police were like for people of color in our country. It was as if a light went off and I became hungry for understanding. I sought out people and experiences that could help me more genuinely understand why people distrust police. There are no words which can adequately capture the deep, historical, and present-day experiences of racism in our country. Nor does my learning place me in any way as an expert in issues related to race and diversity. In fact, it's far from it. I see how little I know, and I imagine that learning will be a lifelong process. Yet, I did begin to notice things that I may have missed in the past. For example, there was this one time I went to the grocery store with Sal, and we always go to the bakery to get one of those free cookies they have for kids. When we got there, there was a line. A white woman was being helped, and behind her was a black woman, and Sal and I were third in line. When the baker was done with the first woman, he turned to Sal and I saw the second woman's face drop. "Oh, she was here before me," I said. The baker turned to help her, and as he walked away, the woman looked to me and said, "Thank you." He knew I was here first, but he was going to help you instead. My heart broke. How often had that happened? How many other times had I unintentionally pushed my way in front of someone else without thinking? It was only a cookie. It would just take a few seconds. But to that woman, was it another reminder of how she came second? As I reflected on this, I imagined how I would feel if I were her, and I felt that I better began to understand why people of color in our country feel that their lives matter less to society than mine. I thought about how I felt watching the news, how it made me feel as if Greg were under attack. And I imagined what it would be like if roles were reversed, and every time I turned on the news, there was another story of an unarmed black man being killed by a cop. How would I feel? So there I was, standing in the eye of the storm, and with it came an immense feeling of hopelessness. It seemed that bringing people together was an impossibility. Alongside this journey of learning, I was dealing with a case involving Greg's death, and every time I had to meet with the lawyers, it was as if I was being sucked into a dark pit of hate. Losing my husband was absolutely the worst thing that could happen, but being asked what I would want for the life of the man who took him from us was a close second. I researched, what does justice mean? What are the consequences when someone is killed? What if that person is a cop? What if that person is killed by a cop? I was a wreck. And there was this one particularly painful day where I left the lawyers feeling utterly defeated. How was I going to sit there in that courtroom and face that man and go home and love my son? How was I going to teach him about empathy and compassion and forgiveness when I couldn't even find that in my own heart? I thought about a lot of rational explanations for what I could teach Sal about justice, but none of them brought my heart peace. It wasn't until I imagined how I would feel if I were the mother of the man who killed Greg. And immediately I pictured Sal, so filled with hope and possibilities. And I imagined that what she wanted for her son was not so different from what I wanted for my own, that neither of us wanted to be here. I wondered, what if we had found that man before that day? Would we have found a man in need? And what if we could have helped him? Would we even be here? I realized then an opportunity for police and community to come together, that what we want is essentially the same: for our communities to be safe, our families to be protected, and our children to thrive. What if we could work together towards that shared goal? Heroes in Blue was rebranded to Serve and Connect to better reflect this message, and our mission was expanded to emphasize the critical importance of partnerships in driving improvements in community safety, resilience, and well-being. Serve and Connect seeks to be the bridge between police and community, and we create opportunities for them to interact in a new way. Take, for example, our Greg's Groceries initiative, which provides police with boxes of non-perishable food to give to people in need. Each box contains enough food to help feed a family for a week. In just the first year, 890 boxes of Greg's Groceries were delivered to people living in food insecure areas in over 40 zip codes. That's close to 19,000 meals. And the program is more than just food. It is about hope. At a recent community event, a woman stopped me, and with tears in her eyes, she said, "You don't know what this means for me. I was scrounging up enough change in my pocket to buy a single banana, and then you gave all of this to me for free." Our work is new, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished in a short time and excited to see it grow. Serve and Connect is about bringing together police and community, but I believe the message resonates far beyond. It is about building authentic connection and trust, even in the face of some of our most divisive issues. Early in graduate school, I read an article that I loved. It was called In Praise of Paradox, and the message was that we must never become one-sided in our efforts to promote change, that all social issues hold equal yet paradoxical truths that must be balanced. Had I remained trapped in my own perspective, my efforts to bring police and community together would have been stagnant. I had to be brave enough to lean into what was uncomfortable for me to hear, to listen deeply and openly and see the world from the other side if I wanted to stand a chance. Doing so inspired the creation of an organization, and it also brought about peace and healing in my own heart. This experience is not mine alone. Countless studies show that collaboration leads to improved outcomes across fields, from community psychology, public health, healthcare, and more. And yet collaboration is so difficult to achieve, especially when faced with our most divisive issues. So what can we do? The key lies in empathy. We must first commit to our cause that we refuse to become one-sided. And this may mean facing the very thing you view as your opposition with an open heart. It means having courageous conversations which require you to listen deeply and openly, to lean into what is uncomfortable for you to hear. My goal here is not to tell you how to have courageous conversations, as there are already a number of great resources on the topic. But I am trying to say is that courageous conversations are worth having. They drive empathy, they inform effective solutions, and they ignite transformation. I am also trying to say that if courageous conversations are something that you want to have, then you have got to be patient. Patient with yourself and with others around you. Empathy, like most things, is a skill. It takes time. I have grown so much over the past 3 years, and yet I am still imperfect. There are some things that I'm okay at understanding and other things that I'm not, and to me, that is beautiful. We should always be seeking to grow in our compassion and understanding for one another. It is that growth which drives solutions grounded in empathy. We all hold within us a tremendous capacity for connection, and we all hold the responsibility to break down the walls that have grown between us. All we have to do is let love lead. Thank you.